The state of the NBA is fantastic. We just came, you know, I think, appreciate your introduction in terms of the power of sports, but at the same time you hear about the demise of sports lately, and especially in terms of the breakup of the bundle and the demise of sports ratings. But, you know, it's quite remarkable when you look at, in terms of the rating points that are represented here. I think 88 out of the top 100 rated shows last year were live sports events. And that's up from just 5 years ago where it was 39, and from 10 years ago where it was 14. So our ratings are more than holding their own, and on a relative basis are more important than ever before. And then from, you know, an absolute standpoint, we're coming off our highest rated finals in 19 years, and it was only 5 games. I wish there had been more, but it was highest rated in 19 years. I know that, Rob, you're coming off your highest rated World Series in lots of years. I know Roger's coming off, I think, not necessarily the highest rated, but the most watched Super Bowl in the history of the world. And Gary's coming off a big increase in Stanley Cup. So I think, just speaking on behalf of all of us, the state of the industry is terrific.
What makes us a little bit different, 25% of our players come from outside of North America, 50% of our players come from Canada, and the rest in the United States. We've never seen more youth participation than we're having now. The registrations of hockey players, young players with USA Hockey, is at an all-time high, and they say for every player you get 3.1 fans, and our fan base continues to grow. We played at 95% of capacity in the regular season, more than 100% of capacity in the playoffs. Testament to standing room. That's how you do that. But we have enormous opportunities. Historically, we have been underserved by traditional media, and HDTV and all the digital platforms and social media for us represents an opportunity where we haven't been as well served as the other 3 sports in terms of national media. You know, under our current agreement with NBC. Now, we're celebrating our 100th year this year. Makes us the second oldest of the 4, only behind baseball. This is our 100th season and 125th year of the Stanley Cup. But this is the first national TV contract in the United States where all of the games of the playoffs are on national television. And we never had that before, which is one of the reasons, I think, in terms of the size of our audience, not their avidity, but the size has always been impacted by underexposure, coupled with the fact that if you look at our footprint going back to as late as the mid-60s, we were in 4 U.S. cities. Obviously now with 31 teams, a new team in Las Vegas, our footprint is broader than it's ever been. But we have a great opportunity to grow in places and in ways that we've never been able to do it before, because we're getting more exposure in more places. And, you know, people make fun of us because we fight to preserve a franchise in Arizona, of all places. But one of the stars for the ages, who just played his first year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, came from Scottsdale, Arizona. And he will tell you that if it wasn't for the fact that his uncle is a 4-year-old, took him to a Coyotes game, he probably never would have played hockey. So we have, we think, an enormous opportunity to continue to grow.
Amplify Gary's point, it's not just tens of thousands of people watching e-gaming competitions in arenas, it's hundreds of millions of people now watching e-gaming competitions, largely over the top services like Twitch and YouTube, you know, and other video distribution mechanisms. So we're continuing to embrace it. I think traditionally, you're right, it's been a business and a marketing tool for us. I mean, right now, just take NBA 2K, we have about 9 million units in the market, and with enormous engagement, largely from young people who are learning the game, learning the players. But so now, to take that to the next step, we're seeing the enormous interest in e-gaming, and, you know, Jim's very involved in this. We're in the process of forming, in essence, a new league. You know, and I'm sure David Levy's going to be involved in as well. He's sort of experimenting in e-gaming. And what we're doing is taking that NBA 2K game and turning it into a 5-on-5 e-gaming competition. And we're going to be launching next year. 17 of our 30 teams are launching with teams. And it's not, the difference is for those who are gamers, these are not NBA players that imagery, the images that will be participating. It's not their avatars. These are professional athletes who play video games for a living. Many of them are represented by the same agencies that represent our players. Many of them make well over $1 million a year. and they're going to be engaging in these competitions. They're going to be hired, training together, and competing. And people will watch these competitions in arenas, and people will watch these games through various distribution systems. And I think for us, it's a little bit of a twofer, because we get the benefit of promoting the game of NBA basketball and interest in the game, but it's also, we're developing new content and appealing to a new audience as well.
Do you see it that way, Rob? Is that
I think it's
a big part of your kind of gateway strategy, or a growth business?
We do think it's an important source of particularly young fan engagement. We see a lot of opportunity in this space. We have a partnership with Riot Games at BAM Tech. Their game, League of Legends, very popular, and one that we see a lot of growth. We think you can learn a lot from the demographics of the people that are engaging in this activity, and it has carryover in our business. And I think maybe the best demonstration of that carryover is you're seeing some of our owners, some of Rogers' owners, investing in these esports leagues, even when, and Adams as well, even where there's not the direct NBA 2K, we're promoting basketball, but that there's a broader kind of complement between esports and the traditional leagues that can be, I think, beneficial to both.
Yeah, it's a positive, because I've often said I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a sports fan, than it is today, because you have so many options to consume media. It used to be when I was a kid, you'd wait for the game to show up. Now you don't wait for the game, you go get it. And you have it on any platform you want, you have it immediately, and you don't have to look around very hard for it. So from my standpoint, the fans are really the beneficiaries of all this. Fantasy sports are great for us. We love the E-Leagues. We think it's a great opportunity for us when we're investing in it. Our sponsors, EA, are obviously with Madden game, which is the most popular sports game in the world, I think, other than maybe FIFA, that's close, but it's a really great opportunity. But fantasy drives engagement, and we see it in ratings. We see it with our television partners, where even if your team's out of it, you're going to watch because maybe your fantasy players will perform well in any given weekend. And that's a real plus for engagement. It does potentially have a little bit of a negative view of, do they still have the same loyalty to a team that they once had? But they used to turn the television set off, or they used to get off a platform. Now they're not. They're actually engaging with more football or more of the other sports. That's a huge plus for us. We also see it with Red Zone a little bit. Red Zone teaches you to watch football a little bit differently. Thankfully, it's not having any impact on our broadcast audience, and frankly, I would argue has been an additive. It's increased our audiences. So you have to be willing, and I think you said it today actually. You have to be willing to cannibalize yourself. You have to give the viewer what they want when they want it. So you have to go out there and do it. Whether you think it may have a short-term, even a long-term impact on it, you better get in there and get it.
When we think about how fans look at our game, we start with the diversity of the game. 29% of our players come from outside the U.S. Huge Latino presence. Another 9% are African American. And even within our domestic group, right? You think about it, probably more diversity: rural, urban, northern, southern, and candidly, Republicans and Democrats, maybe more so than a lot of other sports. And I think the most important message to young people is that those people go out 162 times in 183 days, and they play what people regard to be the quintessential team game. And that's the most important message that we can send. Secondly, we are really fortunate with our players. We spend a lot of time, particularly with players that come from outside the U.S., educating them about the importance of projecting to our fans the kind of role model that we want young people to see. It's an important part of the sport, and I think that our players are to be commended. With really few exceptions, they go out and they represent the sport great, but it's not without a lot of effort.
Just to the point, I think sports are a unifier. I believe that communities as well as the nation come around. Super Bowl is a day when you know, people come together and they forget their differences for a little while and celebrate who we are. And I think the values of who we are in the sport itself, competitiveness and integrity and perseverance, those are things that we as Americans are proud of. And that's part of who we are and our culture. So I think, and I'll speak for our sport, I believe we represent that. I believe other sports do. And I think teamwork is something that's actually lost in that because you don't succeed in the NFL without a great team. You can be a great individual player, but it's all about teamwork. And that is something that I think is fundamental to who we are as Americans. I do believe that. And I think sports become almost an escape from the daily stuff that we see every day that tires all of us to some extent. And so we have that ability to sort of say, you know what, let's forget that for a few hours and watch a game and feel good about who we are as Americans and feel good about what we do. And our players are increasingly seen as leaders in their communities, and that's a great thing. We're proud of what they do on and off the field. I think they're held to a higher standard than anybody else in our communities, but they meet it. And I think that's a tribute to them. And I know they believe in what they're talking about from a value standpoint in their community, and that's something that I think will only benefit us long term.
The issue of physicality, and I think I probably speak for Roger on this as well, player safety has always been a paramount concern. The issue of fisticuffs in hockey gets overblown. It's an extremely small part of the game, but we have nonstop action. The game's played very physically, very fast, very much on the edge, and to suggest that it may act as a thermostat wouldn't be an exaggeration, because you have guys skating at each other at 30 miles an hour where physical contact's encouraged, and by the way, they're carrying sticks. So if that turns out, but by the way, overwhelmingly, fighting is at its lowest point in the history of the game, and probably over 70–75% of our games don't have a fight in them. And so I think that gets to be a distraction, both from the media and from other quarters where somebody's trying to prove a point. But at the end of the day, what people expect from our game and from football is physicality, and we've both worked very hard, both leagues, to make sure the game is as safe as possible.
I don't own a baseball team, and I got a baseball question. Wimbledon was just played this last weekend, and we saw, you know, men's players serving serves at up to 130 miles an hour. Nobody pitches that fast, right?
No.
And they were able to use technology to determine, right, whether that ball was in or out by as little as an eighth of an inch. So why do we have umpires behind they're calling strikes and balls?
I asked you that at dinner the other day.
First of all, let me say, our umpires are really, really good at calling balls and strikes. They are. Trust me on this. You know, let me say something about the tennis technology, and then I'll say why it's more difficult in baseball. You know, you should always think about a technology where what they show you as part of the replay is a simulation as opposed to the actual stop frame. So think about that when you're watching tennis and see what conclusion you come to. Our strike zone is not a single line on a fixed court, right? It's a plate. It's three-dimensional. The ball passes through the strike zone at different points. We do have a system that we use in broadcasts that measures balls and strikes. In all candor, that technology has a larger margin of error than we see with human umpires. Someday, I think it will be up to the task of calling balls and strikes, but I actually believe that at that point you have to ask yourself a question as to whether you want to take that human element out of the game and replace it with a machine.